Klaus stood there stunned, unable to process the reality that had befallen him. As his thoughts lagged, he failed to notice the voice calling out to him, asking him if he could hear them. Before he realized it, the goddess Muse was standing in front of him. Shocked, he asked if she was the goddess Muse. He wanted to know why he was in the ethereal realm, so the goddess asked him in return if he didn't remember. Just then, fragments of Klaus's memories flashed through his eyes. He was struck by lightning, and the last thing he heard was his sister's voice calling out to him. As an image of him withering away faded in his mind, the goddess revealed to him that he was now on the verge of death after being struck by lightning. The goddess paused, correcting herself. Struck wasn't exactly the right word. The reason he was dying now was because of her. Legend said that the gods maintained the balance of the world and constantly made adjustments to that balance. Lately, monsters have been active in cursed areas. The goddess used to grant power to kings and talented nobles, but she slipped up and granted power to a human with no talent. This mistake resulted in Klaus's untimely death. Bro didn't get isekai'd, he got accidentally deleted. His body couldn't handle that great power, and now he was in a critical condition, on the verge of death, as they said. Klaus slowly processed the truth dumped on him, and he bitterly accepted that this would be the end. However, the goddess was confused, as this wouldn't mean he would die. Seeing how puzzled he was, the goddess explained that she fixed the vessel that broke because of her power, and she even made it bigger. Klaus was fine now. Hearing that, Klaus figured that he wouldn't die after all. The goddess explained that she didn't want to kill anyone by mistake, but it would take time for her to regain her power. If possible, she hoped Klaus would use this power to help the world even a little. Klaus understood, and he promised to help if there was something he could do. The goddess asked if he really meant it, and she thanked him before he could even reply. Just as she held his hand, he slowly started feeling sleepy. As he drifted away, the goddess told him to listen, and she informed him that when he woke up he would find a skill and that he should use it. When Klaus opened his eyes, he was immediately greeted with a tight hug from his sister. He was in shock seeing his sister crying in front of him. She was relieved and truly scared that he would die. Klaus was at a loss for words, and he could only mutter Celia's name, his sister. His father and mother greeted him as well, and he smiled upon seeing them. His father remarked that he worried them because he was unconscious for a whole week after being struck by lightning. His mother chimed in, adding that when his heart stopped she thought it was over. Klaus tried to make sense of what they were saying, and he finally recalled the incident that led to his near-death experience. He immediately asked Celia if she was okay. With teary eyes, Celia mentioned how he protected her at that moment, which was why she didn't get even a single burn. Klaus smiled, finally understanding what had happened. Celia hugged him tightly, but he awkwardly asked her if she could move a little away from him. Still, Celia kept hugging him, sharing that after she felt relieved she completely lost her strength. Their mother smiled, saying there was nothing to be done. Celia had been worried about him the whole time, so their mother asked if Klaus would let her sleep with him that night. Klaus was taken aback, and he argued that it was a little too much. Just then, Celia's eyes started to water, leaving Klaus no choice but to yield. He reminded her that it would just be for one night, which was enough for Celia to say that she loved him. The next morning, Klaus woke up to the feeling of being hot and in pain. As expected, Celia clung to him while she was sleeping. He quickly got up, realizing how strange everything had been. He then remembered the goddess Muse, who had told him something about a skill. He muttered status, and a screen immediately popped up before him. It told him everything he had to know down to his basic information and current stats. To his surprise, he found that his skill was hatching. This was the power granted to him by the goddess Muse. From near death to poultry management. Klaus wanted to try it right away, so he got up to head outdoors. As he left, his mother asked if he was really okay now, and he insisted that he was fine. As he headed out, he guessed that his skill must be connected to eggs, since it was called hatching after all. If he got an egg, he could test that skill. He headed to a poultry farm and bought some eggs there. Then he went to a secluded area. He thought it was good that he was able to get some eggs from the farm, and all that was left now was to actually try it. Before he could begin, he admitted that he was nervous. As he heard from Celia, if someone had a skill, they could use it when they focused on it. Klaus did just that, and he envisioned what he wanted to happen with the egg in his hand. Suddenly, a strong light emitted from the egg, leading him to wonder what was happening. He struggled to hold it up because he felt like something was being pulled out of his body. As the egg slowly hatched, Klaus motivated himself to stay strong for just a little more. Shortly after, the egg cracked some more until it finally hatched. As the chaos died down, Klaus was finally able to breathe. Bro almost passed out for an omelet. The egg had hatched, and now a little chick was staring right back at him. It was alive and well, relieving him because he managed to use the skill. He actually used it, but for him, to hatch 3 chicks like that was quite impractical. Overwhelmed, he lay on the ground, accepting the disappointment. That night, Klaus returned home, not expecting to be this exhausted just from using a skill. As he reached for the door, he wondered if Celia was mad at him now. Just then, he overheard his parents talking inside. They asked Celia if she was sure about what she wanted, then they mentioned how she was so eager to study at the Royal Capital Academy. Klaus was curious as he eavesdropped, and he wondered what they were talking about. Suddenly, Celia yelled back, telling her parents not to make her repeat herself over and over. She decided to stay where she was. Her father replied that she was the living memory of his sister and it was his duty to support her until she became an adult. Her mother asked if that was right, then she mentioned how Celia had the skill magic. Celia cried, telling them to stop. She then mentioned how they borrowed money to buy medicine for her brother's treatment, and she reminded them that enrollment in the Royal Capital Academy also required registration fees. She stuttered, telling them that she didn't want to be a burden on the family. That emotional nuke came out of nowhere. Klaus didn't know. He didn't realize that his father and Celia endured all that hardship for his treatment after he had been struck by lightning. All of them struggled, and yet they never showed even the slightest sign. Klaus smiled, realizing just how lucky he was. His mother washed clothes every day and prepared the meals. His father, who, even after coming home tired from work, still taught him how to swing a sword. His little sister was also always by his side, and she took care of him. Going to the capital was Celia's dream. Knowing that, Klaus decided that he must do something for her. He decided not to enter the house right away, and instead he headed to their storage area. As he entered, he thought to himself that if he took a normal job he wouldn't save enough for the registration fee. Just then he saw armor, which was exactly what he needed to make a large sum quickly. Shortly after, he headed to the Adventurers Guild where he was greeted by the staff. She asked if he wished to register as an adventurer, and Klaus said yes. With that, the staff asked him to fill out a form. At the Adventurers Guild, one could earn large sums depending on their achievements. He heard his father was also an active adventurer in his youth, and luckily some of his old equipment was still at home. Just then, Klaus told the staff that he was finished with the form. As the staff read it, she asked if he was a fighter, and he confirmed it. Since he had been training in swordsmanship since he was young, and even from his status, fighter was the most suitable class. The staff mentioned that if he were alone, then only permanent quests were available, like hunting goblins or gathering herbs. Klaus had no problems with those, so the staff went ahead to explain the guild rules to him. First was the Adventurers Guild, where members were divided into 8 ranks. These ranks matched the symbols that appeared in their status, and the letter that appeared in their status was the same as their adventurer rank. Klaus asked if this meant he was rank E, and the staff replied that it seemed so. The available quests differed depending on the rank, but even permanent quests were enough this time. If Klaus kept completing quests, he would save up a good amount, so he should give it his all. Klaus happily thanked the staff, then he immediately headed out. He quickly dashed out the door, eager to do it. He wanted to prove that he could earn as an adventurer. After several hours, Klaus returned to the guild, only to receive 2 coins. The staff handed him his pay for the quest and he thanked her. Afterwards, he excitedly headed into the forest near the village to explore. However, he didn't encounter any goblins as he expected, and after hours of wandering the forest, all he found was a single herb leaf. Bro went adventuring and found disappointment. He disappointingly handed it to the staff, but she reassured him that it was alright because everyone started out like that at first. Klaus sighed, realizing this was no different from a normal day's work. Just then, a buff guy swung his arm over Klaus's shoulder, calling him a rookie and asking how it was going. When he saw that Klaus only brought a single herb leaf, he burst out in laughter. The staff told the guy to stop picking on the newbie, so he apologized but kept laughing. Just then, the guy turned to his party, telling them that this was their party's celebration for taking down an orc all by themselves. He told them to drink as much as they wanted, leading the excited men to ask if it was on his tab. Meanwhile, the staff whispered to Klaus that the buff guy was considered a guild veteran in the area. She asked him not to mind him, and Klaus anxiously agreed. That night, Klaus spent his time working on something special. After a while, he sighed in relief because he was finally done. Since it was a skill given specially to him, he realized it would be a waste not to use it. He admitted it wasn't useful in battle, but if he hatched the eggs like that, it would at least save money on buying eggs. He thought it was fine, and he reminded himself to move forward. He then called himself an idiot who shouldn't get all weak. For Celia's sake, he couldn't show any weakness. Starting the next day, Klaus began heading to the forest to gather herbs, and he was able to collect a few leaves each time. In the early days, even finding 1 leaf a day was an accomplishment, but after a week he started gaining skill. On his way home, he would always stop by the farm to get eggs. Then he'd hatch them before going to bed. As he got used to it, the feeling of exhaustion gradually lessened. One day, as he carried on his usual tasks, he thought that at this rate, he might soon be able to save a decent sum. Just then he spotted an herb and attempted to collect it. However, he was taken aback when he saw a creature before him. To his surprise, it was a magic worm, staring back at him with its big eyes. He was surprised to know that it ate herbs, which somehow answered the mystery of the herbs missing in the area. As he checked on the herb in his hand, he found that it had even laid eggs. Suddenly, he remembered that the threads a magic worm spat out carried magical power and they were used to make luxury clothing. He thought that if he could hatch one, then he might earn good money. This worm about to pay tuition. Thanks to using his skill so much, he was able to hatch chicken eggs in batches of 2 to 3 at once. When he got home that night, he thought about monster eggs and if he could hatch them. Now that he had the magic worm's egg, he finally had the chance to test it. Without wasting time, he used his skill on the egg. As it started to glow, he felt a pressure he hadn't felt in a long time, but from the feeling, he knew he was close. He gritted his teeth as he went through it. and he motivated himself to keep at it a little longer. Finally, the egg hatched, revealing a magic worm inside it. Klaus wondered if it worked, but seeing the magic worm crawling on the floor, he had his answer. He decided to raise it a little and see how it would turn out. But even so, he still felt a little disappointed in his skill. As he stared at his status screen, he recalled that the goddess Muse gave him that skill, but he couldn't help but wonder how she wanted him to use it. He remembered how she told him to use this power of his, even a little, to be in the service of the world. Klaus sighed, whining that if only he had enough power to defeat an orc on his own. Suddenly, the magic worm bumped into his hand, and it stared at him as if it were trying to cheer him up. Just then, Klaus's eyes lit up, as he had finally decided on something. From that day on, the worm's name would be Purple. This is now his emotional support worm. Suddenly, the status screen appeared, informing him that he had acquired a magic boost and had established a contract with a monster subordinate. Klaus was surprised, and he wondered what had just happened. It was like the voice from the status screen echoed directly in his head. Just then, he looked at his status screen and he saw that there were new additions to it. He had an add-on magic boost and the worm was the source. Klaus couldn't believe that his status had changed, and he now wondered what exactly this skill was. Somewhere in the forest, Klaus fought his way through a horde of goblins. 2 weeks had passed since Purple was named. Finally, Klaus aimed his weapon at the goblin before him, which also happened to be the last one. Finally, Boborin had been defeated. To this day, Klaus continued to be an adventurer. After accomplishing his quest, he lay on the grass beneath him, relieved that it was over. He now had 3 silver coins. Just then, Purple crawled toward him, and he commended the worm for doing a great job. Purple did emotional support work. They were making good progress. 2 weeks had passed since then, and Klaus gradually understood the mysterious skill of hatching. First was the monster subjugation contract, a power that literally allowed him to subdue monsters. Since hatching a chick didn't do anything, he realized that the monster subjugation contract required that the creature must be an actual monster, and that it was given a name after hatching. Klaus guessed those were the basic conditions. Just then, Purple crawled away, leading Klaus to ask if he had found something. There was also something else. Since Purple was named, he had been able to vaguely sense his will. It seemed the magic worm had the ability to locate herbs, and lately it had been seriously leading the way for them like that. Now that Klaus thought about it, it was definitely thanks to the magic boost small skill of that creature's power. Ever since then, he stopped getting so tired when using hatching. He guessed that maybe if he tamed the monster he hatched, he would be granted a portion of its power. Just then, Klaus followed Purple, and to his luck he found a field filled with herbs he could sell. To his joy, it was a big haul that day. From broke to moderately less broke. Later that day, he returned to the guild to collect his earnings. The staff thanked him for waiting, then she gave him his reward for the job. It was way more than his usual earnings, and he thanked the staff for it. The staff remarked that the amount of herbs he collected was amazing. He had only been an adventurer for a month, and yet he gathered that much. To her, talent like that was usually rare. Even among seasoned adventurers, not many could do that. Klaus felt embarrassed, saying that he still had a long way to go. In reality, he knew it was almost entirely because of Purple. Justice for Purple. The staff laughed, telling him not to be too humble. Just then, the accomplished adventurer who bullied Klaus caught a glimpse of his earnings, and he could barely believe it. The staff saw his reaction, so she playfully told him not to mock Klaus just because he was a beginner. The adventurer was caught off guard, and he was baffled by her comment. As the tension rose, Klaus wondered what was going on. He collected his earnings, wondering what was wrong with having all of it. He immediately went home, and there he gathered his family at the dining table. Seeing the bag of coins, his father asked what it was. Dad was feeling sus. Klaus explained that with that money he wanted his parents to send Celia to the royal capital so she could study there. As expected, this news surprised Celia. Meanwhile, his father finally understood what he was secretly doing every day. He never imagined he was working as an adventurer to earn money. Klaus was shocked that he knew, so he anxiously explained to him that he had no other choice. His father clarified that he wasn't blaming him, as he also wanted Celia to have the chance to study in the capital. Of course, he approved of her going to study. Celia held her tears back as she heard the happy news. Meanwhile, her mother congratulated her. Just then, Klaus's father asked him if he intended to continue being an adventurer from now on. Klaus pondered the idea, then he revealed that when he first became an adventurer, his only concern was earning money for Celia's school expenses. He was only thinking that he had to support his sister. That was everything to him back then. However, when he touched the hatching skill and discovered its potential, his feelings gradually began to change. He felt like there was something special hidden within it that he hadn't uncovered yet. He had a strong conviction about that. And as he continued his adventurer life, he wanted to learn more about this power. Klaus clenched his fist, declaring that he would continue as an adventurer because he wanted to discover his true worth. This is his anime opening moment. His father was surprised, but he was glad, seeing that fired-up face of his. In that case, he wanted Klaus to prepare to go to the capital as well. Seeing how puzzled he was, his father explained that if he intended to continue being an adventurer, then there would be one condition: he must go to the capital together with Celia. Now Klaus and Celia had finally left their hometown and set out on a journey toward the capital. And just like that, the tutorial village got abandoned. Everything had begun about a month earlier, when Klaus's father placed a firm condition on his future as an adventurer. If Klaus wished to continue down that path, he would have to obtain the National Adventurer's Certificate. The National Adventurer exam was held at the Adventurers Guild in the capital, so Klaus decided to accompany Celia on her study trip there. Among the great number of adventurers, this title was only allowed for a small few. It was the ambition of adventurers who combined wisdom and strength to gain the title of becoming a national adventurer. Klaus supposed his father set that condition as his own kind of kindness. Back then, his father mentioned that Klaus had earned a large sum of money in a short time, so he must have some talent. However, there were many who had talent and ended up with nothing. Above all, there was no guarantee that Klaus would be able to earn that amount again in the future, so he gave Klaus a year as a grace period. If he obtained the certificate within that time, he would acknowledge his right to continue as an adventurer. Just then, he put his hand on Klaus's shoulder, telling him to prove his strength. If he had enough skill, even a dangerous profession like adventuring could be endured. So that was how it was then. Just then, the coachman noticed that Klaus seemed to be in a good mood. He asked Klaus if he was an adventurer and wondered if he was really going to take the exam. Klaus answered that it was his intention. It was true that he was a novice adventurer, but he had always trained with the sword under his father's supervision. But in the end, he couldn't beat the man, not even once. Klaus only had 1 year before the deadline, so even while traveling, he couldn't waste a single moment. To accumulate combat experience, he intended to kill monsters if ever one attacked them. The coachman was amused, and he remarked that Klaus was really diligent. However, Klaus awkwardly argued that he wasn't. Just then, they passed by some young men arguing nearby. Klaus was intrigued, and he pointed out that the atmosphere felt a bit off. The coachman thought about it and guessed that something must have happened. Suddenly, something attacked the men, making them shout in horror. Klaus heard unusual animalistic sounds, and not soon after, he made sense of everything. It was a monster attack. The commotion woke Celia up, so she groggily called out to Klaus. However, he didn't stay long and opted to step out for a bit. One of the men told the others to surround the monster and not let it get close to the carriage. Just then, Klaus asked if it was an attack, which led one of the men to identify him. One of the men confirmed that it was indeed an attack, and they were about to face a troll. As the troll prepared to attack, Klaus noticed how massive its body was. Suddenly, one of the men warned the others that the troll's club strikes were extremely powerful, so they must fight cautiously. The club alone had aura. One of the men asked Klaus if he would back down from participating, but he said no, he wanted to join the fight. With the agreement set, the man told Klaus to go with him. He would block the troll's body, and Klaus urgently said yes. The man then announced that he would take the troll's right side, while Klaus distracted it from the left. Klaus immediately attacked from the left side, and he gritted his teeth as he hyped himself up. But to his shock, the troll locked its eyes on him, catching him off guard. The club alone had aura. The troll slammed its massive club, but Klaus narrowly dodged the attack. Though he survived the encounter, the sheer force and debris slightly injured him. The moment the troll spotted an opening, it attacked right away. Contrary to its slow appearance, it moved quickly. On top of that, Klaus couldn't deny the overwhelming pressure. It was completely different from fighting goblins. Suddenly, Klaus caught himself staring at his status screen, wondering what he should do. He was surprised to see that he had been rewarded with an S-rank item, the Phoenix Egg. According to Celia, the troll was classified among C-rank monsters. When fighting, one should not be deceived by its sluggish appearance. The club it swung with its steel-like arms was said to be able to shatter even the strongest armor that knights carried with ease. If one had underestimated it, they would not have made it out alive. Klaus recalled her words as he fought the troll with the other young men. The thing he had to beware of when fighting a troll was its club attack. If that hit him, then it would have been over. That club is a delete button. However, there was a way to beat the monster. When it attacked, its weaponless left side would be full of openings. Klaus made sure to take advantage of that knowledge, and without a doubt he managed to inflict damage on the troll. The monster screamed in agony, which caught one of the men's attention. He commended Klaus for a job well done and remarked that he had real talent. Meanwhile, Klaus managed to have a safe landing from his previous attack. His gaze was serious, and he told himself that he could do it. However, before he could even think, a massive tree trunk came hurtling toward him. Troll said catch. He was quick enough to dodge it, but barely. As the tree trunk shattered to smithereens, he looked back at the troll who fired the attack. Klaus was disappointed in himself for being careless. If that blow had hit him directly, he would have been dead. Just then, the troll leaped into the air, eager to land a punch. At that moment, Klaus recalled his father's advice. He must never face the attacks of giant monsters head-on. Instead, he must absorb the blow, evade it, and etch it into his body as instinct. Klaus's eyes lit up when he remembered this. He told himself to focus and went on to implement everything his father had taught him. He evaded the troll's attack and went for its arm, slashing it when it attempted to throw a punch. Before the troll made sense of anything, it realized that it wasn't even able to inflict damage on Klaus. Klaus knew he couldn't stop there, so he continued to unleash a barrage of attacks. This was personal now. As he was fully absorbed in the fight, he didn't notice the men staring at him in awe. Finally, the troll succumbed to its injuries and crashed into the hard ground. Klaus tried to catch his breath while one of the men commended him for a job well done. He then told Klaus to take a break and leave the rest to him. Just then Klaus noticed that his hand was starting to hurt, which meant that he was at his limit. Until he could defeat one of those trolls on his own, he wondered how much training he would need. And so, despite a few incidents, the journey continued smoothly. Finally, they reached the capital, Belladonna. They had safely arrived at their destination, and now their future awaited them. After they entered the city gates, the man from earlier parted ways with Klaus. Their work ended there, but if Klaus didn't pass the exam, he wanted him to join their party. They would welcome him with open arms. Klaus awkwardly smiled, telling the man that he would think about it. Along the way, they were attacked by monsters several times, and Klaus joined the fight each time. It seemed like the party had grown quite fond of him, even though he was just moving according to instructions. Klaus felt a bit sorry for them. Just then Celia told Klaus that she was now going to the school she'd be enrolling in. She then asked if he would be heading straight to the Adventurers Guild, and he confirmed that was the plan. He only had a year's time. Celia knew that he would be busy, but she still asked if they could meet at least once a week. This surprised Klaus, so he told her that he couldn't promise anything for sure. He gave her a pat on the head and reassured her that she could call for him whenever she was feeling down. He promised to rush to her from anywhere, which touched Celia's heart. With that settled, Celia and Klaus parted ways. When he was finally alone, Klaus looked for the Adventurers Guild. He went on to wander through the capital, but he soon noticed that he didn't even know where to go. He felt like he had just passed by the same path a moment ago, and the buildings even looked familiar. Strong in combat, weak in navigation. Suddenly, a concerned civilian called out to Klaus and asked if something was wrong. It was a demi-human girl, part cat and part human. With a worried expression, she mentioned that he looked like he was in trouble, and she asked if he was all right. After being acquainted with each other, Klaus learned that the girl's name was Carol. However, Carol was too busy eating her snack, and she only looked at him. She looked at him like, "You can wait, this slaps." Just then Klaus thanked her for showing him the way, and he shared that this was his first time visiting the capital. Carol thought it was fine since she had business at the Adventurers Guild too. Suddenly Klaus noticed her cute animal ears, and he remarked that they were really soothing. Just then he noticed that there were food stains all over her face, so he took a handkerchief and offered to wipe them off. Carol was surprised, but she let him do it anyway. However, Klaus quickly noticed how weird it was. He explained that he was so used to doing that to his little sister that he did it without thinking. He apologized to Carol, while she only looked at him, all stunned. Personal space just died. Just then Carol asked if he was an adventurer, and he confirmed it. She asked what kind of quests he had taken so far, and he replied that it was mostly gathering medicinal herbs. Carol asked if he had any combat experience, and Klaus replied that the strongest thing he had fought alone was a goblin. He really said entry-level violence. Carol felt hesitant to reveal this to Klaus, but she shared that in the capital there were almost no herb-gathering requests. Klaus worriedly asked why, so Carol explained that they had fully equipped cultivation facilities, so there was no need for it. Klaus couldn't believe it, but he knew he couldn't rely on herbs forever. His whole resume just evaporated. As they continued walking, Carol shared that countless adventurers come to the capital chasing their dreams, but most of them earn nothing and end up leaving. Carol advised him not to jump higher than he could, and she asked if he got that. This surprised Klaus, but he went on to share with Carol that he had actually come from the countryside recently to take the state adventurer exam. Carol asked if he wanted to become a state adventurer, and he confirmed it. He asked if she knew anything about it, but she said she only knew a little. She wanted to know what Klaus's reason was, but she revealed to him that it wasn't easy at all. Only 1 in 1,000 passed, and he would be competing against people coming from all over the country. He had to clear everything within a limited time, not to mention the number of candidates who died from the strain. It was that kind of exam. She just trauma-dumped the industry stats. Just then Carol told him that they had arrived. She welcomed him to the Adventurers Guild, which was a building so massive unlike anything Klaus had ever seen. The place was filled with adventurers, bustling through the area in search of new quests. Just then, one of the adventurers spotted Lady Carol, and they wondered who her companion was. Klaus wondered what was going on, since everyone was staring at Carol differently. Just then, Carol muttered his name, which somehow triggered a memory he had from the past. Celia had once shared with him that anyone who earned the title of State Adventurer was granted a special emblem. Its shining golden design made anyone who saw it look at it with admiration. Klaus saw that very emblem on Carol's chest, and he found it to be amazing and pretty. That reveal hit harder than a boss intro. Just then Carol told him to do his best. Once he became a state adventurer, she wanted to work with him. Klaus was dazed by the encounter while the other adventurers gushed at the sight of Carol. Not long after, Klaus headed to the front desk to sign up. The staff thanked him for waiting, and she asked if he was applying for the state adventurer exam. When Klaus confirmed it, the staff explained the details of the exam. Klaus smiled, and he told the staff that he looked forward to working with her. The state adventurer exam mainly consisted of 3 components: a first test and a second test as preliminary stages, and the final test would be a guard mission. He would start by clearing the first test, then the second, and finally the final test. The staff informed him that he'd begin with the first test, and he confirmed his participation. As for the first test, the task was to defeat a monster of rank C or higher. Since a state adventurer needed at least a basic level of strength, the test was meant to measure that. Rank C was the same difficulty level as the troll he encountered earlier, so he knew it was going to be a strong opponent. However, Klaus guessed he could beat one now. Just then the staff handed him a card, prompting him to ask what it was. Once he registered the defeat of a rank C monster on the card, he must submit it, and he would be allowed to proceed to the second test. It was a magic card that state adventurers carried as well, and it automatically recorded monster eliminations. Each test attempt would last for 3 months, and if Klaus didn't complete the task within that period, he would have to start over from scratch, so he had to be aware of that. After listening to the orientation, Klaus thanked the staff, and she told him to take care. Klaus held the card with determination, and he wanted to at least give it a try. However, he suddenly realized that he had to do something before that. He needed to stop by that place first. The Tamers Guild was an organization founded by those who could communicate with monsters. It managed monsters and conducted research on their habitats. It was created for tamers. One day, Klaus went to the guild to register his monster. There, the staff welcomed him to the Tamers Guild. Just then, Klaus urged Purple to come out, and he slowly revealed himself. Klaus apologized since he hadn't been letting him out much lately. Upon seeing Purple, the staff commented on how rare it was. She asked if it was a magic worm, and Klaus confirmed it. He asked if magic worms weren't commonly tamed, and the staff replied that most preferred stronger or more practical monsters. This man chose cuteness over combat stats. However, she found the little guy to be very cute. Suddenly, Purple waved at the staff, and she smiled, thinking her thoughts were correct. Meanwhile, Klaus understood how things were in the taming world. Curious, he asked the staff what the greatest monster ever tamed was. The staff answered that it was a dragon, but she was too occupied with Purple to even look at Klaus. Surprised, Klaus asked if he had heard it right. He wanted to confirm if it was the exact dragon he was thinking about. The staff thought that dragons were really amazing. Not only were they enormous, but what made them truly special was their noble and courageous fighting spirit. On top of that, they were intelligent enough to understand human language properly. As for the person who tamed one, he happened to be present right when the egg hatched. She was about to say more, but she noticed that she had been rambling, so she quickly apologized for it. Klaus smiled, reassuring her that it was fine. Seeing how enthusiastic she was, he guessed that she really loved monsters. Suddenly, the staff handed him a piece of paper containing the guild regulations. There were 3 rules he had to follow. First, a tamer must ensure their monster is harmless and poses no threat to people. Second, a tamer must not use their monster to commit crimes. Third, a tamer must submit reports about their monster's environment. Klaus asked if he could write it there at that moment, and the staff said yes. Also, if possible, there was something else she wanted him to do. Days later, Klaus found himself battling an orc. As it swung its weapon at Klaus, he made sure not to get hit. The orc aimed for Klaus, but it ended up smashing the ground instead, making it explode from the sheer force. Not long ago, the guild staff had asked him to verify the report. They wanted to conduct a follow-up check, if he didn't mind. She asked if it was all right, and Klaus confirmed it, and so it was decided that he'd leave Purple in the guild's care for a while. Since he was currently in the middle of the preliminary test, that offer from the staff member may have been a lifesaver for him. Klaus fights an orc alone while Purple is in daycare. This ferocious orc he was battling was rank D, but Klaus was determined to see how far he could fight on his own. Just then, the orc leapt into the air while Klaus prepared for the impending battle. Their weapons clashed, causing damage that made the orc grunt in pain. As they broke contact, Klaus wondered if that was only a shallow hit. As expected of a rank D monster, the feeling of fighting it was completely different from before. While traveling, the warrior accompanying him would face orcs and crush their skulls with a single heavy blow. However, Klaus didn't have that kind of strength yet. Suddenly, the orc attacked again, but Klaus received it with his sword. The orc didn't see that coming, and it was caught by surprise. Meanwhile, Klaus hyped himself up, thinking that being alone didn't change what he had to do. He jumped away from the orc, but he inevitably had to clash swords with it. As he went through the intense encounter, Klaus told himself not to rush. Fighting meant gradually wearing down one's opponent. As long as he was still standing in the end, that would be enough. True enough, Klaus kept that thought in mind, and not long after he found an opening, allowing him to strike the orc. It fell down the hill, succumbing to its injuries. After securing his victory, Klaus tried to catch his breath. Then he sat down to take a break. Staring at the orc's corpse, Klaus proudly claimed that he did it. He managed to bring it down without taking a single hit. For his first time fighting alone, he thought he did pretty well. Just then he checked his status and he noticed that his strength and endurance were all at level D. This meant that he was currently classified as a rank D adventurer. He checked his stats like it's Spotify Wrapped. If he were going to fight a rank C monster, the best choice would be to target a troll, since he had some experience fighting one. He still had a long way to go, but for now he wanted to focus on gaining more experience and also searching for a troll. On the battlefield, Klaus faced a hulking orc head-on, but he met it without hesitation. It had been 2 weeks since arriving in the royal capital. Thanks to hunting monsters every day, he could now fight D-rank monsters without feeling pressured. As expected of him, the clash ended decisively, resulting in a massive explosion that shook the entire forest. Klaus stood steady in the aftermath, realizing that he was currently facing a big problem. He couldn't find any trolls, even monsters avoiding him. He told the staff about his dilemma and he explained how he had been searching for rank C monsters to pass the first exam. The staff recommended that he defeat other rank C monsters instead, which somehow piqued Klaus's interest. The staff scanned through her book, pointing at a certain area where dire wolves and poison toads lurked. If he went a bit farther to the mines, there would also be golems. Rank C monsters really said pick your trauma. Klaus understood, though he admitted that poison was a bit scary. If it were nearby, he thought that dire wolves would be the safest choice. The staff advised him that if he was going solo, then it would be best. Ideally, Klaus should be acting with a party, but that would tie him to a group and it would be difficult to act on personal matters. Plus, there was the ability he received from the goddess Muse. He vaguely noticed it, but he thought the power he was given made him grow faster. What would take a normal adventurer a year, Klaus could do in 2 months if he were careful. If he joined a party, they would definitely find this rapid growth rate suspicious. Given that, he decided to go with dire wolves. He said, "I'll just not die." Just then he asked the staff if there were any good quests available. The staff replied that there were 2. One was a cockatrice subjugation quest, which prompted Klaus to ask what the creature was. The staff explained that cockatrices were monsters that unleashed special attacks that petrified those they touched. That was more troublesome than poison toad's poison, and if he encountered one without countermeasures, it was said to be nearly impossible to return alive. Suddenly the staff dropped a bomb. It was a rank B monster. As expected, this information stunned Klaus. As for the other request, it was a delivery of dire wolf pelts. Days later, Klaus went on to pursue his quest. He had come pretty deep into the forest, and according to the information, dire wolves should be there. However, he had scoured the area and still couldn't find them. It had already been 4 days since he entered the forest, and camping there was really wearing down his nerves. Klaus mentally exhausted before the fight. After the trolls, he didn't think dire wolves would be unfindable too, but to his luck, he found one. The dire wolf was as ferocious as he predicted it to be, and it was also a rank C monster. The beast tore through its prey, feasting on it while Klaus observed from nearby. He wondered if he could catch it off guard from behind. Suddenly, the dire wolf turned vigilant, forcing Klaus to quickly conceal himself behind a tree. It didn't seem to have noticed him yet, but that was only a matter of time. Knowing that, he figured he should strike first. Just then, Klaus charged forward, but to his surprise, the dire wolf was 2 steps ahead. It leapt into the air, wanting to pounce on him. Dire wolf running on crack and protein. Klaus tried to pierce it with his sword, but it was able to dodge the attack. He was in disbelief at how fast and powerful it was. Klaus quickly secured distance between himself and the dire wolf. The creature growled in fury, eager for round 2. Klaus, on the other hand, now understood that fighting head-on was a disadvantage because the beast had the upper hand in both power and speed. Knowing that, he took something from his pouch. He then playfully asked the wolf if it thought he'd challenge a strong enemy without any preparation. Suddenly, the dire wolf bolted toward him, so he prepared to throw his secret weapon. He challenged the dire wolf to come at him. The secret weapon was inside a small bag, and it fell right into the wolf's face. Klaus smirked, knowing that the real battle was only about to start. The contents of that bag were a large amount of powdered spices. Wolf did not consent to seasoning. Klaus was glad that the Tamer Guild had taught him that. Fire wolves had a very sensitive sense of smell, so if he gave them strong stimulation, they would become weakened to the point that they couldn't move. Klaus could see that it was very effective, and he was grateful to the staff member who gave him the information. Now Klaus had the chance to slay the beast. However, just as he was about to swing his sword, the dire wolf suddenly evaded the attack. It moved so fast that it created debris that hit Klaus, making him grunt. His eyes narrowed, realizing that it could still move. Suddenly, the dire wolf roared, its spine-chilling voice echoing in the air. Klaus was stunned, realizing that this was magic. The dire wolf's magical roar was so strong that it swept the whole area clean, uprooting nearby trees and plants. Klaus gritted his teeth as he anticipated the blow, but his eyes widened when he noticed some trees being uprooted from the ground. Tree trunks and other debris flew all over the area, forcing him to put in more effort not to be blown away. Even when weakened that much, the dire wolf's power was unlike anything Klaus had witnessed. Bro's breathing so hard he's eco-terroring the woods. If he had challenged it without any plan, the one who would have lost would have been him. Right after the chaos died down, Klaus took the opportunity to attack the dire wolf while it was exhausted. He charged forward with his sword, successfully piercing the beast. It roared in pain but shortly met its inevitable end. Its lifeless body lay in a pool of its own blood, allowing Klaus to finally breathe a sigh of relief. That was a tough enemy, and the strongest one he had faced so far. After all, it was a rank C monster. Just then, the card given to him by the Adventurers Guild made a beeping sound. When he took it out of his pouch, he found a notification informing him that a C-rank monster, the dire wolf, had been defeated. Upon returning to the Adventurers Guild, the staff immediately congratulated Klaus. They had just confirmed that he passed the first exam. The staff was very glad that he achieved it safely. Finally, she gave him the reward for the pelt delivery quest. Next was the second exam, but before that, the staff needed to hold on to his magic tool for a moment. Klaus handed her the card and she cast a spell upon it. She then handed it back to Klaus, informing him that some of the magic tool's functions had been unlocked. This surprised Klaus, while the staff only smiled at him. She then went on to tell Klaus that for the second exam he must refer to the list displayed before them. He would need to collect 3 types of C rank or higher rare items. This list was set up so requests from nobles and merchants were reflected in real time. The same list was possessed by active national adventurers and adventurers qualified for the second exam. This meant that the second exam had changing quest content. Plus, it would become a competition with other examinees and national adventurers. Klaus asked if he understood that right, and the staff confirmed it. It was harsh, but that was why they were national adventurers. Since there were clear rivals, it wasn't just about being able to collect them. The time it took Klaus to defeat the dire wolf was 1 month, and his remaining time was limited. The question was which items to collect. To save him the hassle, the staff recommended that he take the plant-type items. Unlike monster materials, plant-type items had a big luck element in obtaining them. So national adventurers prioritized safe items they could definitely get by defeating monsters rather than searching for items they didn't know if they could find. That was why the staff recommended them. Klaus was surprised, but he smiled and said he'd do just that. Bro leveling through botanical chaos. Later that day, Klaus went to the bustling center of the capital. Now the policy for the second exam has been decided. There were various plant-type items, but honestly he had no choice but to search randomly. As he walked, he wondered if he should head to the forest first. He was curious about the rare items he would encounter, and he looked forward to it. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the woods where magical boars and rabbits roamed, a magical egg awaited Klaus. Not long after completing the first exam, Klaus was finally reunited with Purple, who had gotten quite big. Purple was so small until recently, and has grown so much. Puberty hit Purple like a truck. Overwhelmed by his cuteness, Klaus hugged Purple, excited that he would get even bigger. Right at that moment, they were in the forest to collect C rank or higher rare items, which was the condition for passing the second exam. 2 months remained, and time was limited. Given that, Klaus wanted to collect them quickly. He looked around the area, muttering about how his time was limited. Suddenly, he came across a bush, and when he wandered beyond it, he found a herb colony. It was pretty huge, and he had never seen one that big in his hometown forest. He gave one to Purple, asking if it was tasty. Purple, on the other hand, only stared at him with his big googly eyes. In the royal capital, those types of plants were mostly cultivated, so there probably weren't many adventurers who came all the way there to collect them. If that was the case, there was a high possibility that rare items grew wild there. Just then, Purple got startled, prompting Klaus to ask what was wrong. He had never seen him panic like that. He tried to comfort Purple, but he suddenly yanked his collar in a certain direction. Alarmed, Klaus followed the worm's command, asking if he just needed to go that way. Not long after, Klaus finally realized what Purple was leading him to. Before him was a magical herb, its aura glistening under the sun. Klaus was overjoyed, remarking how amazing it was. He picked up the plant, wondering if it was also an herb. Just by looking at it, Klaus was a bit overwhelmed. Suddenly, his card made a beeping sound, informing him that he had obtained the B-rank item, Crystal Herb. Klaus was shocked, unable to process that he had just acquired a B-rank item. He eagerly checked the herbs on the requested items list, but to his disappointment, the herb he found wasn't there. Klaus experiencing joy for exactly 3 seconds. Suddenly, Purple called out to him, so he guessed that he wanted to eat the herb. Klaus thought it was fine since Purple was the one who found it after all. Without wasting a second, Purple happily ate the herb. This amused Klaus, and he asked if it was really that delicious. After eating the herb, something magical happened to Purple. Somehow he looked like he was shining. Just then, Klaus heard something buzzing nearby. To his horror, it was a group of paralyzed bees, and they were flying toward him and Purple. Paralyzed bees had an extremely strong sense of camaraderie among their own kind. The high-quality honey from their nests was prized as a luxury ingredient, but they were monsters with powerful poisonous stingers that paralyzed those they stung. The difficulty of obtaining it was high, and it rarely circulated in the market. Klaus was vigilant, knowing that a troublesome one had appeared. While their attack power was low, they were monsters that hunted by cornering enemies in groups. Knowing that, Klaus decided to detour around the area before they could swarm. Then, out of nowhere, he felt something explode on his shoulder. When he looked to see what it was, he found that Purple was devouring one of the paralyzed bees. Purple just violated the food chain. Klaus was in shock, seeing how unbothered Purple was after eating the bee. Suddenly Purple spat the paralyzed bee's body out of his mouth and it fell on the ground lifeless. Klaus was a bit scared and he asked if Purple was going to eat him next. Just then he spotted another group of paralyzed bees flying toward them. Klaus cursed under his breath, seeing that they were coming again. In no time the entire sky above them was covered in paralyzed bees, who all wanted to avenge their fallen comrades. Seeing the dilemma before him, Klaus worriedly wondered what those numbers were. Suddenly he guessed that they were angry because Purple ate their companion. With this many, there must be a nest nearby. Klaus had to avoid the nest and escape or he would be prey to their poison stingers. Unboundedly, those numbers were bad. Suddenly Klaus told Purple that they were getting out of the forest. Purple on the other hand didn't respond and only seemed to focus on something. Just then a bright explosion occurred, leaving Klaus puzzled. To his surprise it was caused by Purple, who seemed determined to fight the paralyzed bees himself. As the paralyzed bees flew toward them, Klaus noticed that Purple was glowing. All of this made him wonder what was happening, because something like this had never happened before. Just then Purple launched himself forward in a sudden burst of motion, leaving Klaus surprised. In the next instant, energy erupted from his mouth, ripping through the air ahead of him like a living projectile. That worm just became a ballistic missile. The force warped the air around it, leaving jagged trails that reflected his power. The blast slammed into the environment with brutal precision. Trees cracked and splintered on impact, their trunks folding under the pressure as debris exploded outward. As Klaus witnessed all of this, he was left with his mouth hanging wide open. He was even more shocked when he finally found the paralyzed bee's nest exposed in the open. At that moment he realized that Purple had sensed it and headed there. However, despite finding the nest, he still had a problem. The furious paralyzed bees. They were really angry now. Paralyzed bee nests sold for a high price and he wanted to secure it, but it couldn't be helped. He had no choice but to retreat for now. However, Purple didn't agree with the plan and he went ahead and leapt out of Klaus's arm. Without wasting a second, he fired an attack at the paralyzed bees, blowing them up into pieces. Klaus was shocked, realizing that Purple's attack sniped the bees. With this, they might be able to escape the forest safely. He commended Purple for the job well done, then urged him to retreat while they still could. However, Purple didn't listen, as he was too indulged in defeating the bees. Just then he released an attack so powerful that it tore the forest apart. Klaus struggled to stay on his feet while trees, nearby plants, and the bees were blown away by the sheer force. The tree containing the bee's nest also succumbed to Purple's power. The massive nest fell before Klaus, rendering him speechless. As Purple celebrated himself, Klaus admitted that he really was an amazing guy. And so Klaus went on to collect the honey from the nest. A lot happened, but he got the honey too, so he called it good. Honey secured via war crimes. He then turned to Purple, apologizing for keeping him waiting. However, it turned out that the little worm had fallen asleep. Klaus took him in his arms, asking if he had gotten sleepy from eating so much. Purple didn't respond, and he kept on snoozing away. Bro went nuclear, then clocked out. As Klaus stared at the sleeping Purple, he noticed that he was producing some kind of thread. It wasn't his imagination, and it really was glowing. It didn't have the strong brilliance like it did back then though. He wondered if it was the effect of eating the crystal herb or if it was because he ate the paralyzed bee. Unable to answer his questions, Klaus decided to ask the Tamer Guild when he got back. Then as he made his way back to the capital, something nearby caught his attention. It was an egg, hidden among some wildflowers. Klaus was awestruck and he wondered if it was a monster egg. He was puzzled as to why it was in such an open place and he didn't even know what kind of monster it was. However, the chances of eggs being left alone were low. The parent should be nearby. Still, Klaus couldn't help it, so he went closer to inspect it. He held the egg up, wondering what kind it was. Suddenly, his card made a notification sound, and now he wondered what he should do about it. Klaus cannot stop collecting biological liabilities. Klaus couldn't believe that he had found an S-rank item, the Phoenix Egg. It wasn't on the requested items list, which meant he couldn't use it for the second exam. However, if it were S-rank, it was an ultra-rare item that one might only see once in a lifetime. It was a treasure among treasures that powerful people from around the world would eagerly desire. This made Klaus wonder why the egg was in a place like that. Just then he speculated that this could possibly be a gift from the goddess Muse. Klaus realized there was no point in thinking about it since he was in the middle of the exam. However, he thought about hatching it. Not long after, Klaus returned to the capital. His preparations had finally been completed. He prepared water and food, and he also sent a letter to Celia. This time it was a phoenix egg, and he figured it would take quite a while to hatch, so he rented an apartment too. If he was going to use the hatching skill, he didn't want other people seeing it as much as possible. Bro's treating this like a forbidden science experiment. He also told Celia that he wanted her to buy food for him. She was working hard on her studies, so he felt bad about it. However, this was an emergency, so he wanted to take advantage of her kindness. Back then, Celia complained that he was such a hopeless brother. Now Klaus finally had the time to hatch the egg. He cracked his knuckles, ready to do it once and for all. As he started hatching the egg, he instinctively grunted under the weight of it. It was just as tough as he thought. He felt an intense exhaustion since it was an S-rank item. He knew it wouldn't compare to the magic worm, but now, it was starting to get hot. If it came to this, it would be a battle of endurance. Later on, Celia arrived at his apartment, knocking on his door with the food he had requested from her. Celia called out to him and he was relieved that she had come. However, to Celia's shock, her brother looked like he'd seen better days. Worried, she exclaimed that he looked extremely tired. Upon entering his room, she was surprised to feel the escape of hot air, which was abnormally hot. She could sense a power that wasn't magic, and it was overflowing everywhere. Also, her brother's smell bothered her. Klaus asked if it was a magical smell, but Celia bluntly said it was just his regular sweat. Klaus fighting gods but losing to deodorant. Just then, Celia handed him the water and food he had asked for from her. She asked what on earth he was doing in a place like that, but Klaus said it was a secret for now. He could tell her, but if she started talking about skills, it would take forever. Suddenly, Celia pouted, saying that he was terrible for never spending time with her at all. Klaus tried to apologize, so Celia decided to forgive him because she was expecting him to make it up to her. Klaus smiled, agreeing that he would do just that. Later that day, Klaus woke up from an unexpected nap. The brightness coming from his window momentarily blinded him, and it was then that he realized he had fallen asleep. Then, to his shock, he found that the egg had cracked. Even the phoenix felt bad and hatched itself. He thought that there was no way, and he quickly looked for the creature inside it. Suddenly he heard a cry from nearby, and to his surprise it was a bird-like creature. Klaus's face lit up, seeing the little bird running around the room. Suddenly the little bird jumped into his arms, and he identified it as a phoenix. As he touched its fluffy feathers, he remembered that he had to give it a name. He held the phoenix up in the air, deciding to name it Fenny. Fenny chirped with joy, and the system informed Klaus that a familiar contract with Fenny had been established. A bunch of other notifications popped up, which left Klaus in awe. They increased quite a bit all at once. Strength, agility, magic, and spirit went up 1 rank. Stamina went up 2 ranks as well. He checked the buff section and saw that it had various additions too. Klaus stared at the screen, wondering if he could use it. Just then he used purifying flames, and his whole body emitted fire. It had such a gentle color and it felt somehow comforting. For some reason his body also felt refreshed. Just then his eyes landed on the bags of trash left in the corner. He held out his hand, using his fire powers to disintegrate them. To his surprise, only the dirt disappeared, which meant that the flames only targeted impurities. Klaus just invented magical recycling. He thought it was amazing, as he had never heard of an ability like that. He wondered about the other abilities and he checked which ones he could use at that moment. He intensified his flame powers, but he didn't feel any heat at all. He had just used Fire Resistance Extreme and he thought it was amazing. He could expect great things from other combat skills too. This made him wonder just how much he had evolved, and he wanted to test them out soon. After successfully hatching the phoenix egg, Klaus finally allowed himself to go outside. As he frolicked down a field, he enjoyed the outside air, which felt so fresh given how long he had stayed indoors. After hatching the phoenix egg, they were now heading to a certain mine a few days' walk from the royal capital. The objective was the C-rank item Scarlet Diamond Ore that was on the collection request list. 1 month remained until the second exam would end, which was a tight schedule for Klaus, but as long as there was still a possibility of success, he couldn't afford to stop. However, he couldn't help but wonder if it was the effect of the newly acquired Auto HP medium, which allowed him to run the whole time and not feel tired at all. The benefits of skills really were incredible. At this rate, he could reach the mine in 1 day. However, Klaus soon realized that his good day would be cut short because a bunch of trolls were now chasing after him. Klaus manifested violence by thinking peacefully. When he turned around to look, he was met with an attack. Luckily, he was able to evade it before he could get hit. Klaus was alarmed, realizing he was facing a troll, a C-rank monster. This made him whine because it never showed up when he was looking for it. But it appeared now. Still, Klaus thought it was perfect for testing his skills. He was eager to take it down along with Fenny. Just then, Klaus charged forward with remarkable speed, shocking the troll. He moved forward with his sword in hand, successfully injuring the troll before him. His body moved better than before, and he believed it was a benefit of the status increase. Still, he knew he didn't have enough strength to attack 3 trolls at full power. However, he was curious about trying something else. Suddenly, he used Phoenix Feather, which engulfed his arms with flames resembling a phoenix's wings. He charged forward and attacked the trolls, surrounding them in a ring of fire that trapped them. Klaus remarked that it was good. Although the power was weak, it was plenty useful for disruption. Just then, Fenny jumped into the scene, playfully chirping as he opened his beak to release his fiery breath. He fired it directly at the trolls, making them grunt in pain. Fenny woke up and chose arson. This made Klaus laugh out loud because Fenny was helping too. However, one of the trolls wasn't so fond of his laughing, so it tried to attack Klaus. But before the troll could even land a punch, Klaus had already struck the monster with his sword. The troll screamed, but Klaus showed no mercy and went on to release a barrage of attacks. Another troll joined in on the fight, which alarmed Klaus. Suddenly, the first troll he was dealing with attempted to punch him, but it missed and ended up punching the ground instead. The attack was so strong that the ground beneath them cracked open. Suddenly, Klaus found an opening, and he playfully told the troll that its back was open. Before the troll could even think of defending itself, Klaus delivered the finishing blow. Then in a split second the troll's head was severed clean from its neck, from struggling adventurer to executioner. The movements Klaus learned from previous battles combined with new skills gave him more options in combat. He didn't feel like he could lose. After defeating the trolls that attacked them, they finally arrived at the Garcona mine. The place once employed many miners in its heyday, but after being abandoned due to monster damage, apparently only adventurers and thieves visited now. For now, Klaus wanted to find the requested item, the scarlet diamond ore. Scarlet diamonds had high hardness and were gems that required considerable effort to process. A certain noble wanted it as a material to decorate a debutante's dress, so a delivery request was posted at the guild. Now that Klaus had come to think of it, he didn't bring a lantern. However, with Fenny there, he didn't need one. Just then, Klaus noticed that the area near the entrance had been completely mined out, which he already expected. Not even a fragment of diamond was left. Suddenly, he noticed that it was getting a bit hot. Even with fire resistance extreme, he still felt a bit hot. He guessed it was an extremely high temperature, and he wondered what was up ahead. As he walked deeper into the mines, he found that there was lava flowing inside, which somehow explained why the place was so hot. Suddenly, Fenny chirped with joy, making Klaus confused. The little phoenix dove right into the lava, causing Klaus to shout in horror. However, he saw that Fenny was completely resistant to the heat, and if anything, he treated it like a bath. Klaus was relieved, realizing that it was highly expected for a phoenix to enjoy that high temperature. Klaus is screaming while Fenny is exfoliating. Just then he noticed something shimmering nearby. It was a massive diamond, so he went and picked it up. He was hopeful that it was exactly what he was looking for. True enough, the system informed him that he had collected a C-rank item, the scarlet diamond ore. He was surprised to find a C-rank item that easily, but when he thought about it, he realized that it was impossible for others. If it were that easy, there should be more competition. That diamond screamed bait. After collecting the scarlet diamond ore, Klaus called out to Fenny, wondering where he was. He realized that the situation was bad as he got too absorbed in searching for diamonds and got separated from Fenny. Before going out to search for him, Klaus took a sip of water because it was still very hot. Even with his resistance, it was getting hard to endure. Once he found Fenny, he planned to get out of the mines quickly. Suddenly, he noticed something interesting up ahead. He went to check it out, and to his surprise, it was overflowing with scarlet diamond ores. Klaus found the premium section. Just then, Fenny appeared carrying a sword in his beak. He quickly reunited with Klaus and landed on his shoulder. Finally, Klaus knew where Fenny had been all along. He asked the little phoenix where he got the sword from, but he only stared at him as if he wanted him to have it. Bro casually brings back an S-rank weapon like a dog with a stick. Klaus took the sword and he rubbed Fenny's chin to thank him. Then as soon as he held the sword, the card informed him of something, which surprised him. Not long after, Klaus and Fenny finally made it out of the mines. Now that Klaus got the diamonds, he could finally go home. With this, the second exam item number 1 was cleared. However, Klaus soon found that his day was going too well. Before him, numerous golems blocked his path, preventing him from going further. Peace was never an option. As the golems stared at him with their glowing eyes, Klaus smiled sarcastically. Just when he thought he could go home, this happened. Despite his dilemma, Klaus smiled, thinking it was fine. He took out the Sun Sword, the S-rank item which Fenny had given him earlier. He figured it was a good opportunity to test it out. As the golems prepared to attack, Klaus playfully remarked that they looked like they were ready to fight. With a smile, he invited the golems to come at him. He's beefing with minerals. Furious, one of the golems, known to be a rank C monster, charged forward. When Klaus went to the cave, he didn't see any golems, and it was unnatural for that many to gather in one place. This made him speculate that something caused the golems to appear. Just then, Klaus noticed something peculiar. The golem that attacked him passed right by, and they weren't even looking at him. To his surprise, they were looking at the scarlet diamond ore. Klaus now understood that the golems had become stronger by absorbing the rare ores, making them grow as monsters. Suddenly, he called out to Fenny, asking him if he could count on him. The little phoenix chirped in response and he took the bag of ores into the air. The golems could do nothing about it, but it angered them. Meanwhile, Klaus was fired up. He charged forward with the sun sword, aiming to pierce one of the golems with it. He slashed his sword with all his might, making the ground beneath them crack open. Klaus smirked, but when he saw the aftermath, he realized that the golem was unscathed. Imagine flexing and nothing happens. The force of his attack sent him back, but he still couldn't make sense of why his sword didn't cut. The sword was as light as a feather, and while he could swing it fast, it was difficult to control. He couldn't grasp the center of gravity and missed the chance. Still, it definitely felt like he struck it. This made him wonder why the golem was unscathed after all that. Just then, Klaus's eyes widened in surprise as he heard something explode. It was the golem. It shattered into pieces, crashing on the ground before him. Klaus smiled, realizing that it was cut after all. Dramatic pause premium edition. The sun sword had such a sharp cut as if he sliced through butter. He still couldn't believe that he did that to a golem. He couldn't get over the blade's sharpness and he thought it was incredible. However, it was to be expected from an S-rank item. Finally, it made sense to Klaus how it worked. Suddenly another golem attempted to attack him, but before it could even get close, Klaus greeted it with a slash of the sun sword. The golem suffered from the attack as the force rippled through the air. Klaus didn't stop there, he released multiple attacks, refusing to stop until all of the golems were eliminated. It didn't even come as a struggle, as he laughed throughout it all. He wanted to see more of the sun sword's capability, so he pushed through. Not long after, the long-fought battle was finally over. Klaus took a sigh of relief seeing the defeated golems scattered all over the area. He grasped that moment knowing he won. Not long after, Klaus returned to the Adventurers Guild, where he was greeted by the staff. She asked who the bird was, and Klaus replied that it was Feni, a phoenix that he tamed. The staff freaked out, demanding to know how he managed to tame a phoenix. To add to her shock, Klaus asked her to exchange the ores for money. She trembled, struggling to believe that these were scarlet diamond ores. To top it all off, Klaus managed to obtain that many C-rank items. All of the sudden information flooded the staff's mind, and she struggled to cope with the idea of diamonds and phoenixes in one day. With her mind still buffering, the staff took the ores, and she asked Klaus to wait a moment. Her brain blue-screened. Meanwhile, Klaus felt sorry for the staff because she looked so confused. Not long after, Klaus received his reward, gold coins. He was in awe, as it was his first time seeing them. Just then, he shifted his focus to the next task. He only needed 2 more collection tasks for the second exam, and he wondered what he should aim for next. Just then, he bid the staff goodbye, but she told him to wait. She had something to say regarding the National Adventurer examination, and the guild had a proposal for him. The proposal piqued Klaus's curiosity, and he wondered what it was all about. The staff explained to him that, as an official request from the guild, they would like to receive materials from the phoenix that he had tamed. They would like him to provide them with Feni's materials. This puzzled Klaus, so the staff explained to him that phoenixes were called mythical beasts and were extremely powerful monsters with rare abilities. Their materials had the same rare value as dragons. In short, the guild really wanted to secure materials that rarely appeared on the market. Klaus finally understood, and he realized it wasn't a bad offer. Since it was a request, it meant that he could count it as one of the second exam materials. Within 3 weeks he was to collect C-rank or higher items, and if he did it, he would still need to collect 2 more. At that moment, Klaus knew this was an unexpected stroke of luck. Suddenly, the staff added that as a special exception, in recognition of Klaus's achievement in collecting high-rank monster materials, they would consider him to have passed the second exam of the National Adventurer examination. This revelation stunned Klaus, and he struggled to believe it. The staff asked for his thoughts, and to her shock, he refused the offer. The staff was baffled, so Klaus explained to her that Feni was important family to him. Besides, he didn't want to pass by sacrificing his family. Feni chirped with joy, then plucked a feather from his chest, proudly giving it to Klaus. Klaus took it, asking if he wanted him to use it and if he was sure. When the little phoenix nodded, Klaus turned to the staff, asking her if it would be all right. The staff lit up with excitement and she confirmed that it wasn't a problem. She then took the feather and told Klaus that she would issue the request, and she asked him to wait a moment. While she was away, Klaus gave Feni a pat on the head, thanking him. Feni said, "I got this." Shortly after, the staff returned, handing him the reward for the request. Klaus was stunned, realizing that he had just received a gold coin for the second time that day. Suddenly, the staff congratulated him, as he had just completed the second exam at that moment. This isn't fair anymore. After that would be the main exam, but before that, she informed Klaus that he had a recommendation. Suddenly, the staff from the Tamer Guild came barging into the building. She seemed relieved to have found him. Klaus, on the other hand, recognized her right away. Without explaining, she just went ahead and dragged him with her, claiming that he had to come to the Tamer Guild right away. There was something urgent that he had to know about Purple. Upon arriving at the Tamer Guild, Klaus found that Purple was in a cocoon-like state. He stared at the giant cocoon, asking if this was truly Purple. Purple really said evolution jump scare. The staff sadly confirmed it, and she explained that after eating a huge amount of food he suddenly started spinning thread. They lacked information about magic worms, so they didn't know what state that was. They were at a loss. She had the available staff looking into whether there were any similar cases in the past, but it wasn't going well. Just then Klaus asked if he could help with that too, which puzzled the staff. She clarified if he was referring to the search, and she disclosed that it could take days. However, Klaus said that he didn't mind. He caressed the cocoon, saying that this was Purple's crisis after all. This surprised the staff, and she remarked that Purple was very fortunate. With that settled, the staff planned to bring in more people. They would mobilize all the staff and find the cause, and so they started searching through ecological records and materials of various monsters one after another. However, as they went on with the search, they found nothing. Even after 2 days of searching, they still couldn't find any clues, and only fatigue accumulated. Everyone was at their limit, and Klaus knew they had to rest. This is unpaid overtime. Just when Klaus was on the verge of quitting, Feni flew into the air, releasing something as he flapped his wings. The staff tried to make out what it was, and to their surprise, they were sparks. This was a bad situation, so they hurriedly tried to protect the materials. Suddenly, One of the staff members noticed that the flames weren't hot and the materials weren't burning either. Rather, it felt good. The staff were dazed by how great it made them feel, and they collectively sat together to feel the sparks from Feni. The staff from the Tamer Guild frantically asked Klaus what this was, so he explained that it was the Phoenix's unique skill, purifying flames. It was a skill that purified impurities inside and outside the body. Feni, in his own way, wanted to be helpful to everyone. This bird really opened a spa. One of the staff exclaimed that it was amazing, and he even noticed that the dirt was evaporating. Their sweat was gone, and they felt refreshed. Even the stains on the desks were disappearing as well. The staff from the Tamer Guild was so impressed that she strongly exclaimed that it was incredible. Meanwhile, Klaus noticed something about Purple. Just then, Purple emitted a strong, blinding light that made everyone question what was happening. The staff said that Purple was glowing and that something was happening to him. Then, to their surprise, Purple emerged from the cocoon, donning his brand new wings. What a diva! Klaus stared at the winged creature before him, asking if it was Purple. Suddenly, Purple emitted a strong surge of power, making everyone struggle to keep themselves standing. Just then, the system informed Klaus that a familiar contract with Purple had been re-established. He had acquired magic increase, magic control, wind magic, and wind resistance. Klaus stared at the screen and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Apparently, this winged creature was definitely purple. The staff guessed it evolved, which she hadn't expected from a magic worm. It seemed that the species was a rainbow butterfly, which instantly stunned everyone. This was the same rainbow butterfly that was classified as a rank A monster. The staff quickly scanned her book, confirming that Purple was a super rare monster with powerful magic resistance. It was said to mainly inhabit only the Great Tree Sea and fairy forests, but much about it was still unknown. As the staff and her members tried to process this information, Klaus proudly proclaimed how amazing Purple was. Suddenly, Purple communicated something to Klaus which confused him. He wanted him to hold out his hand, so Klaus did just that. To his surprise, Purple released some sparkling powder on his hands. That's not pollen, that's rent money. When he asked what it was, the system informed him that he had collected a rank B item, the rainbow butterfly scale powder. The staff beamed with curiosity and she asked what it was. Klaus chuckled at her reaction, but before he could answer, a man walked into the vicinity asking what was going on. Worried, the man claimed that he heard the most unladylike shriek. After that, the man invited Klaus to his office, and he formally introduced himself as Rebrandt, the Tamer Guildmaster. He told Klaus he was pleased to meet him, and Klaus responded by introducing himself as well. As the staff spoke to Rebrandt, Klaus realized that this person was the top of the Tamer Guild. After reading the report given to him by the staff, Rebrandt learned that Purple suddenly evolved without any warning. However, he wondered how that was possible. Klaus explained that he once gave Purple crystal herb as food, which baffled the staff and Rebrandt. The staff was so shocked that she wondered why he would do such a thing. To make it worse, he also shared that Purple also ate paralyzed bees before Klaus be feeding pets like he's speedrunning evolution. Hearing all that, Rebrandt realized that to evolve into a rainbow butterfly, one needed to tame a magic worm and feed it crystal herb. The creature must also defeat monsters to make itself stronger. It might also need to be bathed in purifying flames. Rebrandt remarked that this wasn't very realistic, and they couldn't carelessly release this information. If there were mistakes, it would be a disaster. For now, he wanted to leave the case as cause unknown, to which the staff agreed. Purple is now a state secret. As they continued the meeting with a cup of tea, Rebrandt moved on to the next matter. Klaus guessed it was about the rainbow butterfly scale powder, and he asked if it was really that amazing. The staff explained that the scale powder was treasured as a catalyst for expensive magic tools, and it was an ultra-rare item. She heard that recovery items like potions could double their effects when passed through the scale powder. When making weapons and armor by mixing metal, one could create magic swords with high magic conductivity. One could even make armor with excellent magic resistance. It was a coveted material for craftsmen. After hearing all this, Klaus was convinced that it was truly amazing. Just then, Rebrandt gave Klaus a proposal. He mentioned the phoenix feather and the rainbow butterfly scale powder, and he asked if he was interested in consigning the sale of the items to the guild. Klaus seemed confused, so Rebrandt explained that the Tamer Guild also purchased monster materials, of course within limits that didn't burden the familiars. He reassured Klaus that they took proper care. Some monsters drop valuable materials, but there were unscrupulous people who tried to get close to adventurers and buy expensive materials cheaply. So by having the guild mediate, they could avoid such troubles and let Klaus focus on his adventuring work. That was the whole idea of consigning. Klaus pondered the offer, knowing that he had no particular reason to refuse. The guild would profit too, but this proposal had plenty of merit for him as well. Capitalism has entered the chat. Finally, he decided to agree to the proposal, and he shook Rebrandt's hand to seal the deal. As long as it was just what was naturally obtained, he didn't really mind. After that, Rebrandt asked Klaus if he was currently taking the National Adventure exam, and the young man confirmed it. Rebrandt asked if he had a recommender yet, and he nominated himself. He wanted to support an excellent tamer. Klaus seemed to have no idea what that was, so Rebrandt asked if he knew that in order to proceed to the main exam he needed a recommendation from 3 upper-class citizens. This revelation shocked Klaus and he seemed stunned to hear it. Rebrandt thought there was no way that he just found out about it, but Klaus's horrified look explained everything. Rebrandt's questioning Klaus's survival skills. Klaus, together with Purple, dauntlessly faced a pack of dire wolves. He was relieved to find them and he saw them as nothing but prey for the day. Suddenly, the wolves sneered at Klaus and Purple, and they simultaneously launched forward. However, before they could even get close, Purple released a web-like thread that immediately subdued the wolves. Purple secured them tightly, then he used his immense strength to hurl them into the air. Meanwhile, the other wolves didn't dare back down, and they prepared to avenge their comrades. Suddenly, Fenny appeared and he rained fire on the wolves. The creatures screamed in agony while Klaus only stood there watching. He smiled seeing that Purple just got involved. He took on a subjugation request to observe its condition, but his familiars, even though they were still growing, were overwhelming D-rank monsters. This meant that he had nothing to do. Accepted the quest just to become the emotional support bystander Klaus sighed, knowing that this situation was troubling. Later that day, the guild staff told him that in order to challenge the National Adventurer Examination main exam, he needed recommendations from at least 3 upper-class citizens. She tried to explain that to him, but he just walked out. Just then, the staff told him that the other examinees had already gathered their recommenders, which surprised Klaus. The staff thought that it might be harsh for him, who had just recently come to the capital, but normally, recommenders were gathered through strategic adventuring work. Klaus asked what she meant, and so she explained that some quests allowed people to meet nobles directly. In such situations, if one was evaluated well by nobles or merchants, they became their recommenders. That was the standard approach. It was not a bad deal for them either if the person they recommended became a national adventurer. However, such people judged an adventurer's character. They didn't become recommenders on a whim or for fun, and they supported someone because they recognized them as the real deal. That was why getting 3 recommenders wasn't easy. Later that day, Klaus thought about the staff's words and it made him sigh. On the bright side, he only needed 2 more recommenders. He thought that gaining trust in such a short time was no easy task, especially when dealing with upper-class citizens. He sighed once again, thinking that if only he had someone to consult with. Just then, Fenny chirped to get his attention, and to his surprise there was a dire wolf's carcass lying beside him. He asked Fenny and Purple if they were letting him have the prey, and they quickly made noises to signal that he was right. When your pets finish the mission and toss you the loot like, "Here, damn," Klaus gave his familiar some pats on the head, seeing how he had made them worry. Just then, he stood up and grabbed his sword, telling himself that he would now stop worrying. He faced a massive horde of dire wolves, sneering at him with a deadly aura. 3 weeks remained, and he promised himself to do everything he possibly could with all his might. With that, Klaus showcased his powers by slashing his way through the ferocious wolves, relentlessly releasing attacks as he went. As he reached a flow state, he told himself that this was right. He didn't have time to worry because he had come that far to become a national adventurer. There were still plenty of things he could do. Later that day, Klaus went back to town to meet up with Celia. He apologized for keeping her waiting, but she seemed rather pleased to see him. Klaus remarked that it had been a while, but Celia paid no more attention to him and focused it all on Fenny. She cuddled the little phoenix and asked his brother what the child was as she found him to be cute. Klaus chuckled, relieved that she was doing well. He was worried when she suddenly sent a letter saying that she wanted to see him. Celia's reaction quickly changed, and then she admitted to him that there was a reason she called him that day. Klaus kept quiet as Celia continued, revealing that she had something to consult with him. Before disclosing anything important, Klaus and Celia decided to go to a nearby cafe. There, Celia ordered a bunch of pastries and fed them to Fenny, who happily accepted the offer. "I swear this bird is getting fatter by the day." Celia was amazed as she had no idea that her brother had a talent as a tamer. Klaus only laughed it off, claiming that he didn't know either until he became one. Just then, Celia asked if he had another familiar, and she wondered if it stayed home. Klaus confirmed it, adding that right now the Tamer Guild was looking after it. Suddenly, Celia overheard 2 girls talking behind her, which quickly made her expression turn serious. She asked Klaus if he had been quite active lately, which prompted her brother to ask what this was about all of a sudden. Celia remarked that he tamed a rare monster called a mythical, and he passed the 1st and 2nd National Adventurer exams in succession as a promising up-and-coming adventurer. She then told him that he had become quite the topic at her school. Even though they had never actually seen him, there were girls who said that they were his fans. Faceless, voiceless, still pulling stands, unreal behavior. Klaus was excited to hear that, but Celia quickly called him out for his sloppy expression. He tried to explain his side, but Celia had already turned away in annoyance. She argued that it was fine because she was happy when he was active too. Klaus could only sigh, knowing there was nothing he could do. Suddenly, he remembered that there was something that Celia wanted to consult with him. With that, Celia revealed that it was about school. At the school she attended, there were commoners and nobles enrolled, and there was a wall between them. It saddened her to admit that there was a strange atmosphere. Klaus asked if she was referring to the divide between commoners and nobles, and Celia confirmed it. Just then, she revealed that she had recently been invited to a noble's party. Klaus asked if this made her a debutante, which surprised Celia because he knew about it. Klaus believed that the Scarlet Diamond Ore collection quest he took before was for tailoring a debutante dress, which was perfect because Celia needed one. Though this surprised Celia, she seemed quite hesitant. Klaus observed his sister's expression, and he could tell that normally a commoner refusing a noble's invitation was forbidden. But even if she wanted to attend, dresses were really expensive, and it would be extremely difficult for a student like her to prepare one. That was why she was consulting with him. He now wondered if the noble who invited Celia had known about this and intended to deliberately embarrass her. Just then, he asked Celia if she wanted to do something about this situation. Celia said yes, but only if there was a good plan. Suddenly, Klaus told her that it was simple and that she could leave the dress with him. Klaus stepping up as a brother and a fairy godmother. This surprised Celia, and she reminded him that dresses were really expensive. However, Klaus told her that it was no problem and that she shouldn't worry. He had the rewards from all his previous quests, and he was also selling feathers and scale powder from Faney and the other familiar to the Tamer Guild. Even if he paid for a dress, he shouldn't be in financial trouble. Just then, he told Celia that she could have told him sooner, but she confessed that she didn't like relying on him all the time because he always helped her. However, by the looks of it, Klaus could tell that she had been worrying about it for a while. That being said, he didn't want her to feel sorry because he was doing it because he wanted to. Celia was touched by his words, and she simply acknowledged it. That very night, Klaus went off to order the dress for Celia. He thanked the tailor, then went on his way. He let out a sigh of relief, knowing that the dress was taken care of. It was a rush order, but he was glad they could tailor it. Now Celia shouldn't be embarrassed. Now he wondered how he should deal with his own problem. Suddenly, Carol appeared behind him, bumping him with her chest while asking if something was wrong. That was so unnecessary. Klaus was surprised to see her as he didn't notice her at all. In fact, he didn't know when she got behind him. Carol asked him again if he was worried about something, which caught him off guard. Klaus fell silent, then he revealed everything to Carol. As the night progressed, they both ended up talking on a nearby bench. Carol thought about his problem with the recommenders. Then she asked if he was troubled because he had no connections. Klaus nervously chuckled, agreeing with how she phrased it. Suddenly, Carol suggested introducing him to a good job, which seemed to puzzle Klaus. The very next day, in a grand mansion filled with glamorous ornaments and wealthy nobles, Klaus anxiously tried to loosen his bow tie. He was dressed in a fine tuxedo, seemingly ready for his new job. He stood there, all nervous, as there were nobles as far as his eyes could see. This was the job from Carol, and he had to do it properly. That day was a debutante ball, and the guests were the stars of the party. The job that Carol introduced him to was security work at the venue. Since it was a job introduced by a national adventurer, there were many upper-class citizens among the party attendees. If Klaus could do work that could catch their attention there, he might be able to gather recommenders all at once, or so it seemed. He thought it was a coincidence. Celia said that her party was coming soon, but timing-wise, the party she was invited to was probably the one where Klaus was at. He was excited by the thought that he might be able to see Celia in her dress. Just then, Klaus overheard some people talking about a girl who hadn't come out. They were starting to speculate that her dress didn't arrive in time. When Klaus turned to see who was talking, he saw a group of noble girls gossiping about another girl who had good grades. They thought she had the wrong idea because lowly commoners weren't welcome at the event. Klaus was stunned, realizing that the divide between commoners was everywhere. People were like that. Suddenly, another group of girls started gathering, impressed by the person who had just entered the room. To Klaus's surprise, a girl adorned with the finest clothing walked in with her glorious aura. The girls started gushing at the sight of her. It was none other than Lady Angie from the Count Popkins family. She had a dress studded with scarlet diamonds, and it was nothing short of beautiful. They thought it was the best dress ever, and it simply looked lovely. As Lady Angie waltzed through the room, Klaus instinctively rubbed his aching head. He realized that this was nobility, and it must have been tough to study among this. He could only hope that Celia wasn't pushing herself too hard. Just then, someone entered the grand hall, sending some of the boys into a frenzy. They urged everyone to look, thinking that the girl who had just entered was amazing. As everyone went to check it out, Lady Angie frantically stood there, seemingly annoyed that they weren't paying her any attention. "Ma'am, we can't all be main characters." Suddenly, Celia slowly entered the room, which made Klaus glad. Dressed in the best dress that money could buy, Celia walked in with grace and elegance. Some of the girls couldn't believe it, but it was truly her. They were in awe of the glittering particles on her dress as well as the feather ornaments. That was without a doubt a supreme piece only permitted to a select few. Some of the noblemen complimented Celia on her divine dress. They thought it was a magnificent design, with elegance flowing through its modesty, and that it perfectly complemented and harmonized with Celia's charm. They couldn't believe that they had actually encountered such brilliance in a place like that. Hearing all this made Celia smile, which also made Klaus glad. After hearing Celia's predicament, he pleaded with the clothing shop owner to make an exceptional dress from the mysterious fabric that created rainbow colors depending on the angle of light. He had them use rainbow butterfly scale powder for the hair ornament adorning Celia's light blue hair. He also had them use phoenix feathers. We all deserve a loaded brother like Klaus. As Celia continued to accept the compliments of the guests, Klaus couldn't help but smile. She seemed to be doing fine, so he decided to focus on his own work. Suddenly, Lady Angie walked right past Klaus, gritting her teeth in frustration. She was upset that a commoner's daughter had upstaged her. Suddenly, she took a glass of wine from a nearby waiter, planning to do something sinister with it. Her eyes narrowed, and she declared that she would teach someone who didn't know their place exactly where they belonged. As the night progressed, Klaus roamed around and concluded that the party should be wrapping up soon. Now that he had come to think of it, he started wondering about what to do about the recommenders. Suddenly, someone approached him asking if he was Klaus. When Klaus confirmed it, the man was ecstatic, relieved that it was actually who he thought it was. The man quickly shook Klaus's hand and he remarked that he was pleased to make his acquaintance. He introduced himself as Lloyd, a baron in the country. Just when the man was about to reveal his reasons for approaching him, another man called Klaus. The man introduced himself as Dolman, and he ran a trading company in the royal capital. Suddenly, another man named Manfrey entered the conversation. More joined in, and before Klaus knew it, he was being surrounded by a crowd of noble men. The men started arguing, insisting that they were first to speak with Klaus. However, none of them backed down, and they only thought that the other men were ridiculous. Meanwhile, Klaus only stood there wondering what was happening. He logged in and instantly got jumped by side quests. Suddenly, Lloyd cleared his throat, apologizing for the whole fiasco. He then mentioned how Klaus was currently in the middle of the National Adventurer's exam. He added that they approached him because they wanted to assist with that. He brought up the recommenders needed to challenge the exam, and he asked if Klaus was looking for them. Klaus was shocked, as he never expected them to bring it up first. He thought about welcoming them as recommenders, but something in him was hesitant. Just then, a man intervened, warning Lloyd that it was enough. This man was none other than Lord Margaret, who reminded everyone that the party was a venue for young people. It wasn't a place for adults to discuss politics with security guards. Lloyd quickly apologized for his mistake, and he slowly backed away along with the other nobles. Meanwhile, Klaus was surprised that the upper-class citizens hurried away like that. He could feel an overwhelming presence from the person who had just called out Lloyd. Just their presence commanded the entire space, which prompted Klaus to wonder who exactly the man was. Suddenly, Lord Margaret spoke to Klaus, telling him that he seemed to have been quite conspicuous since coming to the royal capital. Klaus was surprised that Margaret knew about him, so the Lord went on to say everything he had heard about him. His name was Klaus, from a rural town, and he was staying in the royal capital to become a national adventurer. He had tamed a phoenix and a rainbow butterfly, and he also possessed 2 ultra-rare items in this short time. Klaus was surprised, as a gag order about purple should have been in place at the Tamer Guild. With a vigilant stare, he wondered how Lord Margaret found out about all that. Lord Margaret asked if it was strange, but he broke it to Klaus that any noble had useful sources of information. Secrets weren't so easily kept. Bro found his LinkedIn and plotted an organic encounter. That said, he told Klaus that moving around that conspicuously naturally drew attention. Taming Feeny and the others was that significant of an event. Lord Margaret also pointed out that Klaus seemed to be trying to gather recommenders earlier. However, he warned him to stay away from those people. When Klaus asked why, Lord Margaret explained that he would eventually be in a higher position than them. When that happened, he would have to become their backer. Klaus seemed confused, which made it clear to Lord Margaret that he didn't get it. However, he was sure that Klaus would understand eventually. The monsters that he tamed were that rare. Just then, Lord Margaret suggested arranging recommenders for the exam. He had a few people in mind that he planned to introduce to Klaus, and they were ones whom no one could complain about. Overwhelmed by this sudden gesture, Klaus asked who he was. Lord Margaret quickly realized how rude he had been, so he went on and introduced himself to Klaus. He also added that he was the head of the Risch Count family and the top executive of the National Adventurer Organization. Naturally, Klaus was stunned to hear this revelation. Suddenly, Lord Margaret wondered if the recommenders he would provide would be unsatisfactory. Klaus frantically said no, knowing well that this was the top of the National Adventurer Organization, a pillar of the nation. He wondered if he should just nod honestly, but he couldn't help but speculate that there was an ulterior motive. He was now stuck in a dilemma on how he should answer. However, before he could say anything, a commotion caught his attention. To his shock, a broken wine glass lay on the floor, soaking a girl's dress with its red stain. Lady Angie feigned innocence, saying that she was sorry because her hand slipped. Meanwhile, Celia, the unlucky victim, sat helplessly on the floor, her dress ruined by Lady Angie's jealousy. Damn it! There aren't any dry cleaners in the isekai world. She was on the verge of tears, which alarmed Klaus. However, Celia only acted as if it was all right. Lady Angie happily asked if she was forgiven, then expressed how glad she was. Suddenly, she reminded Celia of how pitiful she looked in her state, and she suggested that she change her clothes. Celia was stunned by her comment, and even more so when Lady Angie asked if she had a spare dress. Seeing that she was speechless, Lady Angie acted surprised that Celia didn't have one. Just then, she claimed to have a great idea. She suggested that Celia change into her uniform as she thought that it would fit her perfectly. However, Celia knew that in this place where everyone was dressed up, being the only one in uniform would be like public humiliation. To make it all worse, Lady Angie fumed at the idea of a commoner's daughter becoming the belle of the party. She vowed to show Celia how presumptuous that was. At the other end of the room, Klaus watched everything unfold. His eyes narrowed and his fist clenched tightly. Guess someone's getting the knuckle sandwich. Lord Margaret witnessed his reaction, so he called out to him in concern. However, Klaus only excused himself, and he asked Lord Margaret to wait a moment to resume their discussion. Lord Margaret didn't mind, but he asked what Klaus intended to do. Klaus's plan was simple. He simply had to do what had to be done. Suddenly, he approached Lady Angie, asking if Celia's dress had gotten dirty. Lady Angie confirmed that he was right, which was why she suggested having her change. Deep inside, she was quite pissed at Klaus because things were just getting good. Meanwhile, Celia sat there helplessly, wondering what her brother was up to. Just then, Klaus said it was perfect because he could be of help. Confused, Lady Angie asked what he was saying. Klaus didn't answer, and instead he showed her what he meant. With a simple snap of his fingers, purifying flames enveloped Celia, shocking everyone in the vicinity. The men freaked out, saying that Klaus cast magic on Celia and that he was insane. Just then, everyone realized what Klaus had actually done. He held out his hand to Celia, and when she took it, she stepped out of the flames without a single trace of the wine stain. Klaus smiled, seeing that the dress was clean now. He asked Celia how it was, but he pretended to act as if she were just some other lady in the room. Bro just won an Oscar for that acting. The crowd erupted in awe, seeing what Klaus was actually intending to do. Meanwhile, Lady Angie was infuriated and she wondered what was with this man. Lady Angie angrily walked up to Klaus, but he faced her without fear. This made her stutter, but she still mustered the courage to ask if he had a problem. Just then, Klaus held out his hand toward her, making it seem like he was about to touch her. Lady Angie was overcome with fear, and she anxiously asked what he was doing. Afraid that she would be burned, she accidentally fell to the floor as she tried to evade his touch. She avoided him like the plague. She screamed for someone to help her, but Klaus only looked at her with a cold gaze. Just then, he used his purifying flames on her, making her scream in fear. When the flames finally died down, Klaus smiled at her, telling her that wine had been spilled on her, making her clothing dirty. Lady Angie couldn't believe that he did that on purpose, so she angrily asked how he dared to do that. He had embarrassed her in public. Not just Celia, but Klaus, whom she knew as a guard, was also her enemy, getting in her way. She was beaming with anger, which further added to her hate for commoners. She could only wish for them to be beheaded. Klaus, who could feel her aura emanating in the air, felt like he was truly being insulted. Lady Angie wasn't willing to let it go, so she turned to the girls nearby, telling them to pour wine on Celia. She quickly changed her mind, realizing that she wanted them to dump food on her instead. The girls gasped because that was just going too far. However, Lady Angie sneered at them, asking if they wouldn't follow her orders. Seeing the threatening look on her face, the girls were utterly horrified. Couldn't blame them for being scared. She looked like she had rabies. Suddenly, a girl stepped forward and asked Lady Angie why she wouldn't stop making a fool of herself. Lady Angie fell silent, then asked the girl, Melissa, what she wanted. Just then, Melissa explained that she came to warn her because she was disgracing the academy. Just because she didn't like that girl's dress didn't mean that she should team up with students from other schools just to harass her. She thought Lady Angie was just as petty as ever. Lady Angie argued that Melissa was the one who lost to her in the dress competition, yet she could say such things. Melissa claimed that she was not that invested in the debutante, and she thought it was pathetic to have nothing else to be proud of. Lady Angie was stunned, even more so when Melissa validated her for having big breasts. Compliments so unhinged it reset the argument. Lady Angie gritted her teeth in anger and warned Melissa not to get cocky just because she was top of the class. Melissa playfully asked if she said something, then referred to Lady Angie as second in the class. Sis Loki called her mid. In the crowd, Klaus only watched them argue. He didn't like either of them, but the one who annoyed him more was Angie. Just then, Lady Angie challenged Melissa to settle it once and for all. She wanted to prove which of them was better, and Melissa was more than ready for Angie to bring it on. However, before chaos could ensue, Lord Margaret stepped forward, warning them that it was enough. He reminded them that they were in a place for noble sons and daughters to make their names known, not a place to raise their voices. The moment they realized that it was the Count, they immediately bowed down in respect. They apologized for such impertinent behavior and claimed to have overlooked it. Lord Margaret sighed, having had enough. Then he called Klaus, telling him to come with him for a moment. Later on, Lord Margaret brought Klaus to his office, and there he asked just how many abilities he was hiding. Klaus anxiously revealed that there were various circumstances which proved to Lord Margaret that he was right to meet him after all. Just then, he shifted the topic and decided to discuss the recommenders he had previously mentioned. He listed a bunch of names. Nicholas de Beck, Dwight de Hall, Xavier de Martine, and Douglas de Boyle had stepped forward. They were, respectively, the Prime Minister, Minister of Military Affairs, Minister of Finance, and the founder of the Tamer Guild. Klaus didn't know what to say, as these were all major figures. With this lineup, his position certainly wouldn't be reversed. Suddenly, Klaus wondered if he could ask one question. By receiving recommendations from those people, he wondered if his sister Celia would have her position improved at school. Lord Margaret was silent as he pondered. An upper-class citizen's position could change depending on how influential their relatives were. The more Klaus advanced, the more his sister's position at school would improve. In other words, if they backed him up, he could help Celia when she was in trouble. Klaus now understood, so he accepted the offer. Meanwhile, Lord Margaret realized that the deciding factor wasn't Klaus's own advancement, but his family. Now he understood what kind of person Klaus was. Celia played with Fenny and Purple on her bed, and she seemed to be having fun. As she gushed at the cute creatures, Klaus smiled. 1 week had passed since the party security job. Just as Lord Margaret promised, he had been approved to proceed to the main exam of the National Adventurer examination, and now he was on standby preparing for the exam to begin. Just then, Celia said that she had never expected her brother to be at the venue, so Klaus explained that a senior adventurer had asked him to. He then asked if she had been harassed since then, but Celia said no. After that, someone of high status had warned everyone around her. Klaus understood and thought it was good. Suddenly they heard someone grunting by the door, so both looked at each other, each with a curious expression. When Klaus opened the door, he found a mailman, who then handed him something. Celia asked if it was a letter, wondering who it could be from. Suddenly her expression turned gloomy, seeing that the envelope wasn't from home. Klaus was worried as well, but he convinced her that it was nothing serious. On the main exam day, Klaus headed to the Stesia Kingdom Royal Academy. He was amazed to see that the entire area was made up of school facilities, but he had already expected this of the capital's largest school. Knights and mages, alchemists and blacksmiths, it was a place of learning aimed at nurturing talent to carry the nation's core, the nation's highest educational institution. A full 900 students were enrolled, but the acceptance rate was an extremely narrow gate. Just then, Klaus decided to head to the exam meeting place, which was in the courtyard. On his way there, he spotted 2 girls gossiping about him. They wondered if he was an adventurer and thought he was barbaric for bringing monsters. Girls, he's literally right there. Klaus smiled awkwardly, feeling out of place. He could only wish that he knew someone there. Then, as if struck by an uncanny coincidence, someone familiar passed by him. He spotted her and quickly realized that it was Lady Angie. He recalled that she was that person from before. He also called her Pansy, which was a type of flower. Why was this so random? Lady Angie was caught aback by his comment, but she calmed down, though she was still clearly annoyed that the security guard from before had appeared. Klaus explained to her that he was an examinee for the National Adventurer exam. Lady Angie couldn't believe it, so she asked if he was in the main exam, to which Klaus confirmed. Suddenly, someone called for the participants of the National Adventurer exam to gather. Everyone assembled right away, and they were told that the National Adventurer exam was about to begin. The exam content was an escort mission, and they would all escort Academy students nearby. Klaus was surprised, but then he recalled Celia's words. According to her, the Academy held an outdoor exam every year with top-ranked students. Depending on the results of the exam, their futures would change significantly. Just like adventurers, this exam held special meaning for Academy students as well. Just then, one of the facilitators mentioned that it had started again that year. As an Academy teacher, he was curious about the performance of both the top student, Miss Melissa, and the second-ranked Miss Angie. The man asked his colleague for his opinion from an adventurer's perspective, and he replied that he was interested in Klaus. The Academy teacher from earlier was surprised, as Klaus looked quite young. His colleague was surprised that he didn't know about the debutante incident, which somewhat convinced him that he would be surprised by the exam. Examinees would pair up and escort 3 Academy students each. With that, the facilitators told everyone to split into their respective groups. Klaus walked over to his group, and to his surprise, the adventurer he was paired up with was arguing with Melissa. The adventurer was surprised that she didn't even greet him, but this only confused Melissa. She addressed the adventurer as "old man" and asked what he was saying. Zero respect, max confidence. She wondered why they should have to get along with adventurers, which baffled the man. She didn't want him to get the wrong idea, so she explained that they were only letting him escort them because it was for the exam. She also warned him to make sure that he wouldn't get in their way. The adventurer was caught off guard and immediately became infuriated. Klaus was also stunned by what he witnessed. Right from the start, there was a hostile atmosphere. This made him nervous, as it might involve a different kind of hardship than fighting. Not long after, the journey finally began. The carriages cascaded down a rocky terrain while the adventurers escorted them. Later on, they finally arrived. After leaving through the southern gate of the royal capital and traveling by carriage for about 5 days, they reached an abandoned castle, the Diablos Demon Castle. This place, said to have been once ruled by a demon lord, was the venue for the main exam. If Klaus remembered correctly, a few hundred years ago when the demon lord was defeated by a hero, he cast a curse. There was an anecdote like that, and the scenery certainly added credibility to it. Just then, he overheard the adventurer from earlier complaining that it must be nice to be a young lady, getting a leisurely education with their parents' money. Melissa was annoyed, and she reminded the adventurer that if he was an escort, then he could be quiet like one. She then whined that she wanted to return him. "Sorry, ma'am. No returns, no refunds." In the end, the two didn't see eye to eye and they scoffed at each other. Klaus was impressed, seeing that they were at it again. During the travel, they were really loud and it was rough for him. This made him tired way before the exam even started. Shortly after, the academy teacher explained the exam content. The exam period was 72 hours, and academy students would explore the castle interior with their adventurer escorts. They would also visit checkpoints in each area. The order in which they navigated this vast demon castle was up to each group. They could visit as many points as possible and they were to demonstrate their competence. With that, the adventurer from earlier urged Klaus to get it started. This Diablos Demon Castle apparently had stronger monsters the deeper one went. Magic stones were placed in each area and the system would award points for bringing them back. In other words, groups that reached higher difficulty areas would earn more points. Another important thing was that the points obtainable from one area were limited to 1. Visiting already conquered areas wouldn't earn any points. Apparently, this exam was designed to make academy students compete. Just then, Klaus spotted Lady Angie standing all alone, deep in her thoughts. Meanwhile, the adventurer from earlier warned Melissa not to go ahead on her own. Melissa was confused and she argued that he was just a slow old man. As expected, the adventurer spat back, making Klaus stressed once again. Deep in the castle, Klaus the adventurer and the other students faced a bunch of armed skeleton monsters. The adventurer didn't dare waste a second and immediately destroyed the enemy. He released a barrage of attacks, finishing them all at once. One of the students complained that it had been nothing but the old man fighting, and that they could handle those easily too. Melissa, on the other hand, was annoyed at the adventurer for being a show-off. Just then, she pointed out that only weak monsters spawned there, which made her ask if the adventurer wasn't being a bit cowardly. Annoyed, the adventurer yelled at her to shut up. The other girl was surprised that he heard that, while Melissa commended him for having sharp ears. Roast disguised as customer service feedback. The adventurer then pointed out that they did whatever they wanted, and his partner was just a youngster. That being said, he was expected to be cautious. He also reminded them that the escort targets should stay quiet in the back. Just then, one of the girls asked Klaus if he wasn't going to join the fight. She thought that with 2 people it might finish a bit faster. Suddenly, another girl told her that it wasn't good. Tames were valuable beings who could command monsters, and asking them to fight was harsh because their monsters could get injured. She could be a therapist. Lucia, the girl who encouraged Klaus to fight, asked the other girl, Lorraine, if she didn't want to see an S-rank monster fight. Lorraine was interested, but the other adventurer seemed sufficient for now. That being said, they would probably see it when the time came. Melissa huffed in annoyance, asking Klaus if he understood that they wouldn't forgive him if he dragged them down. Klaus didn't say anything in response and only scratched his head. Lorraine asked if things would be okay at that pace, but Melissa reassured her that Angie was under the same conditions, so she was sure that it would be fine. And so they continued exploring after that, and they succeeded in obtaining 3 magic stones. When they finally exited the castle, Melissa asked the other girls if they thought they had pretty good results for their first day. They joined the fighting partway through and they were probably in a really good ranking. Just then, someone pointed out that Melissa and her group had returned quite late. It was Angie, asking if they got lost while absorbed in exploring. Melissa was furious to see her, but then she asked what Angie had achieved that day. She boasted that they obtained 3 points, but this only made Angie laugh. Just then, the academy teacher informed everyone that he would now announce the points acquired by each group. In first place was Angie's team, who had acquired 11 points. Melissa was blown away by this news and thought it was impossible. She wondered how Angie got such a high score. Melissa's blood started to boil, as she was speculating that Angie had schemed something. Angie's big breasts have 2 extra brains, I guess. Angie only smirked at her, saying that no one really knew. She then told Melissa that she was taking this competition